Tonight, you are going to lie down in a bed that is too soft, in a room that is too quiet, and your mind is going to race. You will stare at the ceiling. You will replay conversations you had 3 years ago. You will think about things you have to do tomorrow, and somehow that will make you think about things you did wrong in 2017. And then, around midnight, something strange happens. Your body relaxes, your thoughts slow, and just before you fall asleep, a feeling washes over you that you cannot quite name. Not peace, not exactly. Something older than peace. Something that feels, somehow, like preparation. That feeling has a name, and it goes back approximately 300,000 years. Here is what you do not know about your ancestors. You have probably imagined them collapsing after a hunt, exhausted, unconscious before they hit the ground. You have probably imagined their nights as empty, blank, just survival on pause. But anthropologists who have spent years living alongside the last surviving hunter-gatherer communities on Earth have discovered something that changes everything you thought you knew about human prehistory. The night before a hunt was not rest. It was ritual. It was preparation of a kind so precise, so deeply human, that traces of it are still running through your body every single night. You just do not recognize it for what it is. Jerome Lewis, an anthropologist at University College London, spent years embedded with the BaYaka people of the Congo Basin, one of the last communities still living in patterns almost identical to those of our Paleolithic ancestors. What he found was not what anyone expected. The night before a major hunt, the camp did not go quiet. It went alive. The men and women gathered around the fire. They sang, they talked. Not about practical things, not always, but about the hunt in a way that was half planning and half something else entirely. They rehearsed, they visualized, they told stories of hunts that had succeeded and hunts that had failed. Not as lessons exactly, but as a kind of collective mental preparation that wired their nervous systems for what was coming. Lewis described it as a form of group cognitive priming, the social brain running simulations, rehearsing outcomes, distributing anxiety across the group so that no single individual carried it alone. Your racing mind at midnight is not a malfunction. It is that same process, inherited and repurposed. Your ancestors used it deliberately. You experience it accidentally. But that is only the beginning of what was happening around that fire. Richard Wrangham, a biological anthropologist at Harvard University, has argued that fire itself was the hinge point in human evolution. Not just for cooking food, which expanded the caloric capacity of early humans and allowed the brain to grow, but for what fire did to time. Fire extended the day. It pushed the useful hours of human social life past sunset into a space that had not existed before, a few hours between darkness and sleep that belonged entirely to the social mind. In those hours, something extraordinary was happening. Knowledge was transferred. Stories were told. Rituals were performed. The anthropologist Wiessner, who spent decades studying the hoansi people of southern Africa, conducted a systematic study comparing daytime conversations around hunter-gatherer camps to nighttime ones. The difference was staggering. During the day, talk was practical. It was about food, logistics, conflict, complaint. But at night, by the fire, more than 80% of conversation shifted to storytelling, to narrative, to imagination. Your ancestors did not use the night to stop thinking. They used it to think differently. And this matters for the hunt in a way that goes far deeper than morale. Because what Wiessner found was that the stories told at night were not entertainment. They were social technology. They communicated values. They encoded information about distant landscapes, about the behavior of animals, about which strategies had worked a season ago 200 miles away. They built what she called a regional social network, connecting individuals across vast distances through shared narrative. You knew the person in the next valley not because you had met them, but because you had heard stories about them. And when crisis came, when drought or injury or conflict threatened a single band, that network of stories became a network of obligation, of help. The night before the hunt was not just about the hunt that was coming tomorrow. It was about every hunt that had ever happened, and every person who might need you in a hunt that had not happened yet. This is the layer of human prehistory that almost no one talks about. We focus on tools, on cave paintings, on bones and fire pits. But the most important technology your ancestors ever built was invisible. It lived in the spoken word. It lived in the dark, around the fire, in the hours before sleep. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Sleep researcher Matthew Walker, in his work on the neuroscience of memory consolidation, has documented something that maps almost perfectly onto what Wiessner found. The brain does not simply replay the events of the day during sleep. It selects. It prioritizes. It takes emotionally significant experiences, especially social ones, especially narrative ones, and it moves them from short-term to long-term storage. It integrates them. It looks for patterns. It connects the story you heard tonight to the experience you had 6 months ago, and it builds something new from the combination. What your ancestors were doing around the fire was loading the memory system deliberately. They were choosing what the sleeping brain would work on. They were, in a very real sense, programming tomorrow's version of themselves. You have access to this same mechanism every single night. But instead of stories that matter, you are feeding your sleeping brain a scroll of images designed to provoke anxiety and comparison. Instead of deliberate social preparation, you are getting passive stimulation. And then you wonder why you wake up more tired than when you lay down. Think about what the hunter was carrying into sleep. Not dread. Not the formless anxiety of a mind that has been overstimulated and undernourished. They were carrying vivid, specific narrative. They were carrying the collective confidence of a group that had rehearsed together. They were carrying the knowledge that other people were depending on them and that they were equipped for that responsibility, and their body responded accordingly. Cortisol, the stress hormone, follows a precise rhythmic pattern in hunter-gatherer populations that live close to ancestral conditions. It rises sharply just before dawn, not because of alarm clocks or obligations, because the body knows, at a biological level, what is coming. The body was built to wake itself at precisely the moment when preparation becomes action. And that cortisol surge, which we now experience as morning anxiety, as that sick feeling of remembering everything you have to do, was originally something else entirely. It was ignition. It was the body saying, "You prepared. You are ready. Now go." The Hadza of Tanzania, studied extensively by the anthropologist Frank Marlowe, rise before dawn with an alertness that researchers consistently describe as striking. Not groggy, not reluctant, ready. Not because they slept more than you. Most evidence suggests they slept around the same amount, but because what came before sleep and what happened during it was aligned with what was coming after. Here is what this means for you. You are not broken because your mind races at night. You are not broken because you feel a strange electricity in the hours before something important. You are not broken because a part of you seems to be rehearsing, replaying, preparing when you are supposed to be resting. That is the ancient hunt preparation sequence running exactly as it was designed to run. The problem is not the mechanism. The problem is that there is no hunt. The mechanism is running on empty. It has inputs that do not match what it was built to process and outputs that go nowhere. Your ancestors walked into the forest at dawn having spent the night building the psychological architecture for success. They had named what they feared. They had rehearsed what they would do. They had bound themselves to other people in a web of shared story and shared obligation that made individual fear manageable. They had, in the most precise neurological sense, prepared their sleeping minds to do the integration work that conscious thought cannot do alone. Tonight, when you lie down in that bed that is too soft, in that room that is too quiet, and your mind begins to race, you are not experiencing a failure of the modern world. You are experiencing a success of the ancient one. A system so well designed that it has survived 300,000 years of change without breaking. The only question is what you choose to load into it. Because somewhere in the architecture of your body, the hunt is still being planned. The fire is still burning. And the person sleeping next to the flames, listening to the stories, readying themselves for what comes with the light, is still you. It has always been you.